And we're live. Hi everyone, it's Ash here from FPL Hints, back with another edition of FPL Hints Live after a 10 game week hiatus. Just been busy with all sorts of stuff, so haven't been able to do this on a week by week basis. But seeing as we've reached a critical time in the season, it made perfect sense to review the game week that's gone and look at the game week ahead. So, look, without further ado, let's get straight into it, shall we? So, um, yeah, I'm not gonna lie in any shape or form. Uh, double game week 27 was it? If I'm not mistaken, yes, it was. Double game week 27 was absolutely fantastic for my overall rank. The average was 63, and I more than doubled that thanks to the bench boost ultimately. And in terms of how it all panned out, it's a bit more complicated because we obviously had game week 26 when many people wildcarded. Some who didn't wildcard and decided to just carry on, and they had all those Liverpool assets for that 7-0 win. They benefited massively. Unfortunately for myself, I did have the Liverpool assets in game week 25, but that was on a free hit. I just didn't trust them beyond that, and ultimately my rank absolutely suffered from that point onwards. So yeah, I only scored 33 points in um, in was it game week 26, and then had to just hope that the wild card um, really came up trumps. And something that I wasn't going to do, that I did do, was ultimately use the bench boost. The initial thinking was to use the bench boost in double game week 29, and then yeah, just load up on the doublers and have potentially, I don't know, 28 or 27 doublers. But then I decided actually I need to take affirmative action now because my rank took a massive hit. Not that I was ranked super highly anyway. So in the end, I thought, you know what, I'm going to bench boost. And technically, my bench boost players were Steele, who I brought in for Ward. And that meant I had a double Brighton defence as well as Matoma. Maddison as well, who I bought with the intention of double game week 29, but just brought him in because he's reliable for Leicester and he's a star player. And then I've also got on the bench Gabriel, who obviously has been a stalwart for Arsenal's defence this season. And then lastly, I had Dan Burn. Many people have Botman as their second Newcastle defender. I had Dan Burn, so I decided to take a different course of action from that point of view. So yeah, going straight into the points, 131. There aren't many managers on FPL Twitter who scored higher than that. The only one I could think of was Ben Quellin, who scored 134 points and is just ranked outside of the top 1K. So congrats to Ben. So yeah, Luke Steele, he ultimately did the job for me at 3.9 million with the bench boost. Got very lucky that he kept the clean sheet, got a save point and got some bonus points in that final game. And then the defence, Trippier and Burn, gutted they didn't get a clean sheet against Wolves. It was more than doable, but hey, it is what it is. At least Trippier got a clean sheet. Well, not clean sheet. He got the assist. And Burn, if I'm not mistaken, there was a moment in the match where Burn crossed it to Bruno. I think Bruno hit the woodwork, so you know he narrowly missed out on a fantasy return there as well. Defenders, as mentioned on my um, like wildcard reveal, I was heavily reliant on the centre back, so Duncan Me, just hoping that there was no rotation, and ultimately there wasn't any significant rotation in either defences for Brentford or Brighton. So you know, clean sheets in the end for the final game, but it was really that Gabriel clean sheet and goal literally out of nowhere on Sunday, and I wasn't even following that match, and then I saw that he scored. I thought, well, that's brilliant. He scored, I think, 5 goals in the Premier League last season, so he was due a goal. Just didn't expect it against Fulham. I was kind of worried that they could potentially concede in that match. So yeah, look, in the end, that's what 38 points, if I'm not mistaken, 16, 25, 30, 38 points from the defenders. Add Steele, that's 49, and I've not even gone on to Raya, my sub keeper, which I'll come on to shortly. Coming on to the midfielders, Martinelli, look, the temptation for me was to sell Martinelli for McAllister. That's if I didn't bench boost, and if I was going on the bandwagon, that would have been the move, which obviously would have not been beneficial at all. Glad I kept in. Surprised Saka didn't get any returns in Arsenal's game on Sunday. It's just ironic that whenever I own him, he seems to go quiet, but then when I don't own him, he's just absolutely fantastic. So hopefully he'll get some returns for Arsenal, even though, to my knowledge, there's no more double game weeks for Arsenal for the remainder of the season. Mitoma, just brilliant. You know, he got those goals not that long ago. Then he went a bit quiet, and he's picked up again with his 2 fantasy returns in this double game week. I believe they were both assists, which they were, and he got a clean sheet in the second match as well. Almost captained him, but I wanted to be relatively safe in captaincy. Maddison, yeah, disappointing, but I'm expecting more from him with Leicester fighting against relegation, and they're going to heavily rely on him. And yeah, look, Ivan Toney, 26 points. That the assist at the end came out of nowhere. I think at one point he was on for 18 points as my captain because he got the yellow card and lost bonus points, and then literally right at the end scored the goal. He got the assist, got an extra 8 points, so I can't complain there at all. And then yeah, the bench. I did say that on the bench boost that technically Steele was my second goalkeeper. I've just kind of had fun with the bench. I thought I'll put my premium players as my bench fodder. Just it's not often you have Kane, Haaland, and Rashford on your bench, but technically, like I've said, Steele, Botman, Steele, Burn, Gabriel, and who else was there? I just lost my train of thought. Burn, Gabriel, Steele, and Maddison, they would have been my bench players. And in total, they scored 29 points. So on this bench boost, without taking a hit, 29 points. And interestingly, I've benched so many points this season as a result of the players being more affordable. And I just got extremely lucky that the one time when I benched a lot of points this season, I was able to activate the bench boost. So I'm very grateful that that worked to perfection in many respects. And yeah, look, I mentioned was at 49 points. So add the backline, 58 points alone from the backline. And yeah, just disappointing. Rashford again kind of went quiet in his match, but obviously it was a single game week player. But I really like rank perspective, I really needed a good game week because just to put it into context, I think this red arrow and green arrow that you can see on screen literally summed it up. That my rank, if I just go further down, all the way down to when we restarted from after the World Cup. Here we go. So game week, let me just go further down. I think it was game week 16. Here we go. So game week 17 came back with 100 points. Rank went from 622k, 389k, and I thought, oh, fantastic! I've bounced back, and it's onwards and upwards from here. But that was just a false dawn in many respects because game week 18 took a massive hit, and then game week 19 it kind of went backwards altogether. So all that hard work during the World Cup period and all that planning really didn't work at all. So yeah, that was massively disappointing to say the least. And then yeah, got some traction back in game week 20 with that dark green arrow, but then gradually it kind of went up and down, up and down. It was just absolute. I mean, this sums it up here. Game week 20, 457, 488, then 379, 546. It's like a pinball machine, the rank. And then here we go, 570, 403 again, hoping that I've got some traction, but no, get a dark red arrow. And like for my previous 2 seasons, I didn't have this. I had it that I got into the top like 100k super early and then progressed my way up to the top 50k, top 10k, and I kind of stayed there. But this season has been absolutely manic with all this like red arrow, green arrow business. But in terms of my biggest swing, significant gain, and that's crazy. An 8.1 million, 8.2 million game week rank in 26. Honestly felt my season was over. I thought, can't do anything else there. Just got to chuck in the towel and yeah, just think of new ideas essentially. And then remarkably, the bench boost paid off. And this was literally chucking the kitchen sink um, at the situation, because I've used all my chips now. Used my wild card in 26 to build for 27, 28, and 29. And then my triple captaincy was in Haaland in for the first double game week opportunity that we had, which wasn't that great because obviously Rashford, he scored far more points in the later game week, double game week. So that didn't work out too well. Free hit, I did it during this blank in 25, scored 99 points, so that worked fairly well. My wild card, the first one that I used, which was before the World Cup, I just come on to it here. I think it was around game week 12, I think. Was it game week 12? Here we go. Yeah, it was very small. So overall, the chip usage that I've had, I would say it's been, yeah, I wouldn't say like mixed, but it's been relatively positive. I've made small gains, but it's ultimately the bench boost that's put me back in contention for a top 100k rank. I'm not going to finish in the top 10k this season. I think I was well and out, ultimately out of that a long time ago. So for me, it's just, can I get into the top 100k? And I'm hoping I've got some sort of momentum now to do that. But as you can see with the history this season, it's just so wacky and it's so nuts. And it sadly just it yeah, the rank stabilized in game week 5, as you can see there, 109k, 157k, 156k. I thought, oh, that's great. It's actually game week 8, due to the postponement as a result of the state funeral and making a crazy transfer of getting Emerson in for Saliba, because I thought Arsenal wouldn't keep a clean sheet against Brentford. And then not only do they keep the clean sheet, but he scores a goal as well. That completely wrecked my season. And then, yeah, it's just been catch up ever since with just yo-yo ranks. Just look at it, 400k, 600k, 300k. It's nuts. I'm really hoping that I can stabilize it now. In terms of what I've got to navigate now, is obviously we've got more blanks coming up. We've got more doubles beyond 28 and 29. So ultimately, I'm in a position now where I have to do even more upside chasing. And I was in a similar situation last year, in fairness, whereby I used my chips early. In fact, I think it was by blank 27, was it blank or double 27 last year? Used all my chips, and the last 11 just had to hope on and hope for the best. And I think this is where the variation comes in play as well, because some people were scared to use their bench boost in 27. Some have used it, well, want to use it in 29. But it's really ultimately, whenever you think is best for your own respective team. But I decided, you know what, I'm going to absolutely go for it in 27 because I've got nothing to lose, and it paid off. In terms, I just want to also just show you actually, just for further context, my live FPL screen as well here. If I can just zoom in slightly as well. Give me one moment. So, like, live FPL obviously have more information compared to what we've got on the FPL website. I mentioned the FPL website had the overall average at 63. For live FPL, they've confirmed the safety score is 86. Top 10k score, surprisingly, was only 86. Wow. Elite score was 96.6, and overall 64.83. So I massively exceeded that. And I just needed one of these game weeks. I was just surprised that, like, in my rank and top 10k, Steele, okay, less than 10%, fair enough. But Dunk, less than 10% of FPL managers had Dunk in. That was a surprise. Gabriel, okay, a lot of people have other Arsenal defenders in their team instead. Mitoma, just over 100% among the top 10k, kind of makes sense. And then, yeah, Tony, I thought his EO would be a lot more higher than it was there. Me and Raya, yeah, it was less than 40%, but still relatively high ownership for them. And I look at the rank killer, Estupinan, 9 points, didn't matter. I had Duncan, Steele, and then Burn was a bit of a flop, but can't complain too much in a week when I've scored 131 points. So yeah, I kind of feel that my ship has massively stabilized, but as we've seen with my rank history this season, I could just go backwards once again in 28. And looking at 28, I'm gonna review the games ahead now. So coming on to Nottingham Forest and Newcastle United, on paper, this has to be a Newcastle United win, but Forest obviously have turned a corner somewhat um, in the second half of the season as well. I think it's going to be a relatively close match. Newcastle obviously don't concede a lot of goals, but then Nottingham Forest at home are a different kettle of fish. I think they're still actually not that far off relegation. If I'm not mistaken, Forest are only 2 points away from relegation, so they're they're going to hope that they're not going to lose that match. Whereas with Newcastle, we've still got a chance for like European spot. Is Champions League out of the way? We've got 2 games in hand um, over Tottenham. I think it's still technically reachable if Liverpool don't get their act together and if Tottenham get inconsistent results. I'd say that we're not completely out of the Champions League chase as of yet, but definitely a Europa League spot or a Conference League spot is definitely on. So I'm going to call that as a Newcastle United win, just purely because of the overall form, albeit it will probably be a narrow win. And then coming on to the Saturday matches, Aston Villa against Bournemouth, it's very obvious that Ollie Watkins is in the form of his life right now, and it hasn't resulted in an England call-up, unfortunately for him. I guess it was just too soon for the recall to the squad. But Bournemouth are struggling. They've got a negative 26 goal difference. Aston Villa have just found their way under Unai Emery. Just it's completely different setup since the Gerrard days. Has to be a Aston Villa win. And I know that many people have debated whether to get Watkins in for Haaland, and I'm still contemplating it myself, to be honest with you. I haven't completely ruled it out, but you would hope that Watkins, if he was going to give you your money's worth in these 3 upcoming games against Haaland's one upcoming game, which is against Liverpool at home, that ultimately Watkins can get a fancy return in this fixture and also at least another fancy return in the double game week. So he's more than capable of doing that on current form. Has to be an easy Aston Villa win at Villa Park. And yeah, that just don't know. I mean, Bournemouth, they obviously, I'm kind of writing them off. I shouldn't write them off after they beat Liverpool, but I just think that Aston Villa should have just enough to do the business here. Coming on to Brentford against Leicester. Again, Brentford, they ultimately did what they had to do in their match yesterday. And with Leicester, I just don't know what's going on with them. Like at one point they had moved away from the relegation zone, and now they're literally just hovering above it. It's a must-win game for Leicester and Brentford. People are thinking, oh, they're on the beach. They're not even a mid-table team. I heard some people refer to them as a mid-table team, which they're not. They're 8th in the league. They could potentially fight for a Conference League spot at this moment in time. So I'm calling it a Brentford win purely because of the form. Leicester have been struggling of late. If Leicester are going to score, surely it will be through Maddison, if anyone. But I think it'll be a relatively close game. But Brentford should have more than enough to um, cause Leicester problems, and especially their shaky back line. Then coming on to Southampton against Spurs, again we're talking about struggling teams. Southampton aren't completely gone in terms of the relegation race. They're 3 points away from 15th place Everton, but it's just not looking good. You're just wondering that Southampton team, where are the goals coming from? Who's gonna be the leader in their defence? And it seems so problematic, and it almost seems as if with Southampton they should have been relegated perhaps last season or the season before. It's almost as if like they've just ran out of ideas in some respects, and obviously they've got JWP, and he's a very inspirational player for them. But you can't survive relegation just on the back of one player. Whereas Spurs, on the other hand, they obviously have had a bit of unstable form from their side over the past few game weeks as well. But they've kind of found their ground. And if Kane's scoring and Kane's got form, which he is right now, I think they're fairly content. And let's not forget that Kane's last hat trick in the Premier League was also against Southampton, which was unbelievably almost 6 years ago. Not to the day, it was Boxing Day 2017. So, okay, like just under 6 years. But if Kane's going to score another hat trick, then surely it will be against Southampton this weekend. Who knows? So, coming on to our next fixture, Wolves against Leeds. And Wolves are just one of those teams. I just uh, question, what is it that they're offering? Obviously, they had a managerial change during the season, and 3 points away from relegation. They're far from safe. In fact, there's this massive, uh, cut off. I think it's like from 12th place Palace right up to Southampton. There's like 5 points that separate them, and then the next team above them is Aston Villa with 35 points. So literally any one of those teams in the bottom 9 or 8 could potentially get relegated at this moment in time. But I look at like Leeds. Okay, Bamford is back. Is he going to be consistent with his goal scoring? Who knows? I'd have to say that Wolves at home probably okay. They're struggling to score goals, but you'd expect them to cause Leeds problems. I would say that neither team would want to really lose this match. I'd say they'd probably cancel each other out. So I'm calling this fixture a draw. Coming on to Chelsea against Everton, Chelsea just seem like a completely different setup altogether when you've got Chilwell, who's back in form and doing what he does best in his specialist position, and against Everton, who are 15th in the league, you'd expect Chelsea to get a result here. That should be a comfortable Chelsea win on paper. I wouldn't say it will be that comfortable. Probably quite tight with obviously Dyche managing Everton as well. But it's not like they've all of a sudden become a bastion for clean sheets, Everton, under him. They've also had some strange results as well. So I'm calling that a narrow win for Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. And then coming on to the Sunday fixtures, Arsenal against Palace. Has to be an Arsenal win. I know Arsenal have got Europa League football on Thursday night, but they're just in absolutely sensational form right now. And they've got this massive boost with Jesus, who's back for them as well. And crucially, if I'm not mistaken, Palace had a problem with their main goalkeeper, Guaita, during Wednesday's match as well. I'm not sure if he's going to even be fully fit for the match on Sunday. But if he isn't, and Arsenal's attackers are against, is it Whitworth, if I'm not mistaken, Palace's understudy goalkeeper, then that could be like an insane scoreline on Sunday afternoon at the Emirates. So that should be a more than comfortable win for Arsenal there, and they need to if they want to retain their lead at the top of the Premier League. So there we have it. That's my review of the preview, I beg your pardon, of the fixtures that take place for blank game week 28. And then I guess it brings me nicely onto my captaincy polling data as well now. So, and I'm not going to just use my polling data, I'll also validate it with polling data from other sources as well. So, onto the captaincy polling data for blank game week 28, it's clear that Kane is considered the best captain by a significant margin, and that's with him against Southampton. And then you've got Saka in second place with just under a third of the vote. And I was quite surprised. I thought that it would be a lot more closer than that in my poll. And then anyone else, 8.6%, and a lot of those have gone for Ollie Watkins as a differential captain. But with Kane and Saka, if I'm not mistaken, on live FPL.com, .net, their ownership, it's not like massively different. So Saka, his ownership, if I just flip my screen back here, his ownership is 78.3% in the top 10K, and then Kane's is 73.7% in the top 10K. So the ownerships are relatively the same, and across multiple ranked tiers as well, it's almost even at this moment in time. But it's clear that Saka is a differential captain. His EO could even dip below 100% compared to this polling data that we're seeing here. So yeah, is Kane the safe captain? Kane's record against Southampton seems quite interesting as well. And I look at that and I think that, do I want to wait for it? What happens on Sunday? Do I want to see what happens with Saka's minutes in the Europa League as well? And in the Europa League match against Sporting Lisbon, Saka, he actually didn't start that match, which is quite positive for us, for anyone who's considering to captain him. So on that note, that's quite like like stark in the difference. But I want to come on to this other poll that I also looked at, and it's FPL Focal's YouTube captaincy poll. So in my case, I had I think just over 1,500 votes, and this poll has it got the number of 15,000 people have voted on this one. So again, Kane over 61% on mine, 60% here. Saka 24% here and 29.9% on my poll. And again, Watkins 8% and then another 8% for someone else. So that kind of tallies up with polling data that you can see on screen with my set that I provided there. So even with a bigger polling set of data, you can see that Kane is the standout captain for blank game week 28. And if we base it on form, you could make a case for both of them. The fixtures, I would argue, both look quite interesting. And for many managers, it'll be a 50-50 captaincy call. But lastly, coming on to the polling data that we can see on Fantasy Football Scout, if I just flip over here, it's completely different to the sets that I've shown and also on FPL Focal's YouTube poll. So in this case, Kane is nowhere near 60%. It's 41.95% in this polling set among Fantasy Football Scout members and readers. Saka, it's a lot less at 16.5%. And then Tony appears here at 7.79%. In fact, if we just add up all the others, roughly speaking, it's 57 to 58% for Kane and Saka, and you've got 42 to 43% for the others. So I'm very surprised that on this polling, people would consider like an alternative or differential captain. I guess because the options are there, perhaps they clicked on them. But from the 3 polling sets that we've seen, 2 of them with different sample sizes have shown that Kane is the standout captain. And even when he isn't considered the standout captain, he's still considered the popular captain among the Fantasy Football Scout poll as well. In terms of who I'll be captaining, my default, if I was playing it safe, I would go for Kane as my captain for blank game week 28. It kind of makes sense, absolutely. But then, knowing that Saka hasn't started in the Europa League match, knowing that Arsenal need to win, and if Palace start their teenage goalkeeper again, I think there's a strong case for Saka being the captaincy choice. But there's one problem, and this is the problem that kind of puts me off going for Saka in comparison to Kane. It's the fact that who is scoring Tottenham's goals at this moment of time? More often than not, it's Kane. Like in the case of Brentford, Ivan Toney scoring his goals. That's why so many people captained him for the double game week that we just had. Whereas with Arsenal right now, Saka isn't solely responsible for the goal involvements or ultimately scoring. You've got Martinelli in the mix. You've got Odegaard, Jesus if he's fully fit to start as well. So I guess the problem is that there is that risk that, yeah, sure, Arsenal could score big against Crystal Palace, but is Saka going to be involved in the goals? He obviously wasn't against Fulham on Sunday. So that's the one thing that's holding me back. But if Saka was to bang and if Kane was to blank, then that would be a massive upswing opportunity right there. And I'm thinking to myself, do I want to risk it all again for a deep red arrow, or do I want to play it safe for this blank without any hits, but with one free transfer, and then invest heavily in double game week 29? I think that's probably the way I'm looking at it at this moment in time. So I think without further ado, I think that's the end of the captaincy polling data there. I'm happy to go straight into the questions, and I'll just go into my DMs as well for the questions that I've received, as well as on Twitter. So if you want to ask any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat right now, or just tag me on Twitter. So the first one is, am I going to buy Ollie Watkins for Haaland in blank game week 28? And that is the $1 million question for many of us. And for me, it's a tough one because Haaland obviously he's just banged in 5 goals in the Champions League recently. He's got a very good home record. He's breaking records in the Premier League, but of course he blanks in 28. So I see the logic why you'd sell Haaland and get Watkins in, and then you'd carry that on with Haaland just against Liverpool in 29, and Watkins has 2 reasonable fixtures in 29. But then the intention for many would be to get Haaland back in for game week 30, and that's the way to work around it in an ideal world. But then anything can happen, and the international break could throw up all sorts of problems whereby you're already taking big hits as there are, and then like with Haaland, for some people might think, actually, I'm going to wait on selling Haaland this time around. But I'm thinking, if you're really going to sell Haaland, sell him now, and then, make the most of it in the doubles as well. So it is a tough one, but you're also going to lose value in Haaland as well. But if you sell him at this moment in time, you'll lose value. He'll cost more money buying him back, especially if you bought him before game week 1 as well. So I would say that if you're playing it safe as well, I think that Watkins will have a very high ownership. I think a lot of people will sell Haaland for Watkins, and I'm contemplating that move right now myself because I want to get 11 players for blank 28, and I could very easily sell a Brentford player because I've got double Brentford defense, but then I can't really get any other players in. I want Ben Chilwell as well for 28 and 29. So what I could potentially do is sell Ben Mee and Haaland for Chilwell and Watkins. But then the danger is that when I want to buy Haaland back, I'd have to ultimately take more hits and sell other players, because I look at the fixtures for double game week 29 as well, because ultimately that's going to influence any transfers I make in blank 28. And obviously we've got an international break between 28 and 29 as well, so anything can happen. But I look at Brentford and it's like, do I really want double Brentford defence at the Amex and at Old Trafford? I absolutely do not want that. So I could easily even take a hit and get Chilwell in for me and then Watkins in for Haaland. So I've got those players in my team for double 29. But it's going to be really hard to work out. And I'm so glad I'm not bench boosting in 29, because then I've got this headache of the international break, and then it's like having double Brentford defense, double Brighton defense, and then other players as well. You've got your Arsenal players as well, and Arsenal in 29 have Leeds at home. So I'd be hard pushed in wanting to bench an Arsenal player in 29 as well. But at the very most, I'm going to have 8. Well, I say 8 at the very minimum. I beg your pardon. 7 to 8 doublers for 29. But then, yeah, to make it work, I'll have to bench some of those players, and working that out, I can't quantify what it will be. Like, for example, in terms of goal, if Steele is still the starting goalkeeper for Brighton, but after the international break, they're home to Brentford and they're away to Bournemouth as well. And I think Ivan Toney might even be walking a suspension type rope as well. Please don't misquote me on that, but like I think he might even be booking away from um, another suspension. In fact, let me just have a look at the number of yellows he's got, because I know if you reach 10 by a certain period, you also um, get suspended. So yeah, he's on 9 yellow cards. So there is a cut-off for that 10th yellow card. So if he somehow got booked in this match in blank 28, then he's ruled out. And I could then um, somehow, I need to like get cover for him as well, which would be a bit of a nightmare. So I really hope that he doesn't get suspended in 28. I obviously wouldn't captain him in 29 either. So that's something that's worth considering as well. But yeah, it'll be a tough juggling act. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be very hard for anyone to have on a bench boost to have what 28 to 30 effective starters during double 29. But yeah, Watkins for Haaland, me for Chilwell seems like an option. But then even then, it's like, who am I going to bench in 29? And I'm thinking, do I want double Newcastle defense in 29 with United at home and West Ham at home away? I beg your pardon. Probably not. So I could bench Burn easily. I could probably bench if I don't sell. I probably would sell me, but like Dunk, if I'm starting Steele, yeah, I could probably do that as well. And I'd want to start Madison. I would probably reluctantly bench Gabriel in 29 and hope he doesn't end up scoring a goal at that point either. But yeah, it'll be an interesting one to say the least, how that's going to work for me. But I think for those who are not bench boosting in 29, we will also have like significant points on the bench as well. But it's just that triple Arsenal. I just couldn't, contemplate selling any of those players at this moment in time. Coming on to my next question, um, best captain for 28. I've kind of answered that, so you can just look back on the stream and look at the polling data that I've shared in terms of who is worth captaining for blank 28. Um, thoughts on selling? Sorry, thoughts on selling? Let's get this here. Sorry. Thoughts on selling Newcastle assets? Which ones? You've not mentioned which ones. I can't really answer that. Um, Another Newcastle question: should I consider captaining Trippier? Oh, against Nottingham Forest. That'll be an interesting one. Why would you? Why would you consider doing that? Trippier. Obviously, there was a period at the start of the season where he was getting like fancy returns from. Was it like from like the beginning, like game week 1 till 17, and there was a brief period from like 14 to 17 where he was getting double figures as well. But yeah, I would not captain him at all. I just don't see the logic. Even if I was chasing, it wouldn't make sense. I would rather if you're doing that for the sake of chasing, I would rather captain Saka than I would captain Trippier. Because like Forest at home aren't pushovers, and they could easily score in that match, even if Newcastle ultimately beat them. And yeah, just not worth it for me. Um, Best time to free hit if I've still got that chip. So I used my chip, as I've mentioned, in blank game week 25. Got 99 points, as I've mentioned. Um, you've got the blank now. I know there are some managers who had a bad double game week 27 because they didn't invest in the Brighton and Brentford assets, and they're trying to make up for it by free hitting now. But we've got like more blanks. I think we've got one or two more blanks still coming up beyond this current period. So you could probably hold it until then. But the concern that I have, especially for the later double game weeks, and we see it time and time again, also the later blanks as well, that there almost seems to be more rotation, far more rotation, like in like the 30, like late ones, like from like 34, 37 period than you get now. And do you really want to use a free hit or take that sort of risk around that time? Like it's not of interest to me. So I think this is a good opportunity to free hit. You've still got a good set of players. Um, of course, no City assets is problematic, but if you're upside chasing, I would definitely consider a free hit in 28 if I had it. Um, Coming on to my next question, just go back into my DMs. So, um, would you buy Almiron back? Almiron was an absolute troll for me, and he's one of those players where I every time I didn't own him, he would haul, and when I had him, he would blank, and when I benched him, he would haul, and I'm just so annoyed because I had him like from the restart. He scored instantly in that first match, and then he blanked from like 18 right until 22, and then in 23, I benched him against Bournemouth, scored, got 10 points, which was annoying, and then when I get okay, next two matches were Liverpool and Man City, where he blanked, but then he's come back off the bench and scored against Wolves, which was ultimately the match winner. I definitely won't be getting Almiron for the double game week 29. Absolutely not. I can rule that out. But I know that the fixtures get tricky for Newcastle in that double period, but then they kind of pick up as well um, from like late April onwards. But yeah, I'm not going to get him back anytime soon. I kind of feel that the Almiron train has has sailed for me this season. Would I get him next season? Probably, but we'll probably have like hopefully James Maddison or someone else in Newcastle United's squad by then. But yeah, I can't get him in that whole period when Almiron's got was it? Let me just get his data up here. Um, Almiron in total. Sorry, apologies. Just trying to find his stats now. Um, so goals and assists. So he's had like 11 goals and 2 assists this season, and I've only had one of those. So yeah, no, there's no love lost there. So I won't be getting anytime soon. Another question is, should I buy and start Havertz as my blank 28 transfer and double 29 player? So Havertz, I don't know. That's a bit random. Like Havertz hasn't. Okay, he scored against Leicester, of course, in 27. But then before that, he hadn't scored any goals. Like for like 7 game weeks, and he's pretty much been starting all of the matches from then as well. Like I just couldn't contemplate a Chelsea attacker at all at this moment in time. There's literally no one. And I think the last Chelsea attacker I had, if I'm not mistaken, was like Lukaku, and that was like last season. And even then, he kind of went off the boil quite quickly. The only Chelsea assets I'd consider are Chilwell and James. And if there was a way for me to have Chilwell and James as my double up options for 29, I would definitely consider it just because of the potency that they both have, listed as defenders, but can play very advanced. And we know that when they're both fit, both playing in the same Chelsea team, they're very deadly. So they're the only two Chelsea assets that I'd consider at this moment in time. Um, Another one, thoughts on Son? Yeah, I couldn't really get Son. Son is a completely different player this season. He scored less goals, he's had 6 goals and 3 assists to date, and obviously we know that there's form issues there, and he's also spent some time on the bench. No doubt he is like rediscovering his form as well. But yeah, if you're going to buy a Tottenham player, it has to be Kane. Like that's the only standout player. We had it last year where the choice between Son and Kane, it was clearly Son for most of last season. This season, you wouldn't even consider Son, unfortunately. So yeah, I couldn't justify him at all. And then here's an interesting one. Would you buy Trossard after his haul against Fulham? No, I wouldn't. It's not that he's fluked it. He played a very specific role in that Arsenal team without a recognised striker. But then Jesus is pretty much back now, and you can see that Trossard will ultimately get management. So yeah, I would say he's very integral to Arsenal, and he's actually not starting. Interestingly, the Europa League match against Sporting Lisbon um, tonight. So that's a perhaps some sort of indication that he could have a prominent role for this weekend's match. But yeah, I absolutely would not get Trossard in at all. That's just so random. Um, would you captain? Let's get this one here. Sorry, that's answered that question. Um, would you, here we go. Would you consider buying Isaac for the blank and 29? No, I couldn't really justify that one either. In the same way that I can't justify getting a Chelsea attacker in my team, I can't justify getting a Newcastle United attacker in my team either. To be perfectly frank with you, um, you know, obviously Isaac's had fitness issues this season for us, and that goal was a long time coming. I think his first goal in 7 game weeks. Yeah, you've got far better options at that price point. He's like 6.6 million with with a bit of extra cash, you can get a Tony or a Watkins in, and they've also got double game week 29 as well. So yeah, there's no way I'd recommend or justify Isaac as an asset to own at this moment in time. And then coming on to players to sell, um, just get this one here. Yeah, Haaland, I've answered that one, so that's fine. And then just coming on here, would you sell Odegaard for Saka? It's like it's kind of Russian roulette with that Arsenal midfield, as I've mentioned. That you could have a game week where Saka bangs, Martinelli blanks, Odegaard bangs, Saka blanks. It could be literally anything. But I feel that if you've got the funds, it kind of makes sense to own Saka, like in terms of his attacking threat and also the potential of him being on set pieces as well. And then the other player I've got in my team right now is Martinelli. Like Odegaard, he could literally, he could sometimes be playing more advanced. Sometimes he's the creating chances, but almost like the assister of the assist. And I had Odegaard in my team as well. I don't think he ever scored for me actually when I had him before my wild card. So, like, the only two Arsenal attackers I'd really have right now are Saka and Martinelli, just based on form and the way that Arsenal play. But like I've said, it could very easily be that Saka blanks and Martinelli blanks during this game week as well, and get random one like Trossard hauling as well. Another thing I wanted to actually share, if I'm able to bring it up, is the captaincy analyzer from Premier Fantasy Tools as well. So it's something that I've been keeping a track of this season, and it's interesting. I've mentioned how I've had a roller coaster season so far with my overall rank. It's just not been stable at all. But one thing that has been relatively consistent for my FPL team has actually been the captaincy. So I'm just going to bring this up. Just give me one moment. Just make sure it's live. Apologies. So just get this here. If I can just get it up. It's just loading up now. Here we go. So I've got many things completely wrong this season. But one thing that I've got not absolutely spot on, but I've been fairly good on, which you can see there, is the captaincy picks. So my captains are averaging 18 points per game week, which is the equivalent of my captain, if it's a striker, scoring a goal and getting 3 bonus points, which is absolutely fantastic. And obviously, Haaland has played a massive role in that, and also benefiting from double game weeks as well. So of the 26 game weeks so far, I've managed to get returns in 20 of them. Haaland has been the best captain, and Haaland has been the worst captain as well. And in terms of the run of captaincy hauls that I've had from game week 1 right up until game week 10, there's only just one blank, and I believe that was Mohamed Salah in game week 4 against Bournemouth when they scored a ton of goals and he literally got nothing, annoyingly. And normally, you can see a pattern as well that if your captaincy is blanking, then your rank is tanking, and if your captaincy is hauling, that your rank is also reflective of that as well. But bizarrely, in my instance, it's not. It's obviously we've had a very good captain, obvious choice, but then if the rest of the team hasn't delivered, then it's just a bit problematic, so to speak. So yeah, captaincy's been quite good for me. Then had this quite rare back-to-back blank in 11 and 12, and then this sea of green from uh, game week 13 right up until game week 23, just the one blank. It was Haaland in 16, which was just before the World Cup, and that's when my rank took a big hit. And yeah, apart from that, triple captaincy, like I mentioned, it was the first opportunity. 8 points times 3. Yeah, it wasn't great, but hey, it was something. It wasn't a blank. And then more recently, as we can see there, had the blank for Haaland in 24 and the blank for Saka in 26. But um, my rank didn't take a hit because of the captaincy per se. It was just because the rest of the team just didn't perform. That was obviously 26 with Liverpool's monster haul against Manchester United, and then the one in 24 just made a small dent. So captaincy's been quite consistent, and yeah, I'll just carry on with the same approach. Will I be taking more risks with captaincy? I would definitely consider more risks, absolutely, especially when I am effectively chasing now with no chips in the bank as well. But at the same time, I would be a bit more cautious if I'm in a place where I want to stabilize my rank as well. So it's it's an even balance, I guess. So yeah, there's my like captaincy analysis. That it's been a really wonky season to date for me, and I've just got to keep focused. That my focus, like I've said, is getting into the top 100k and staying in there. That's it. I'm not going to aim any higher than that, purely because I'd rather finish inside the top 100k than take crazy risks and fall far back. And I know that with the blanks and doubles after 29, that by default, that's like a red arrow waiting for me because I've got no free hit, no bench boost, no triple captaincy. And it's not to say that lots of people have those chips still at hand, but it's something that I'm going to have to navigate very carefully. There'll be strategic hits, there will be strategic transfer rollovers as well. I just recall an instance, I think it was in blank game week 31 last year. It was an absolute nightmare game week, which I still remember. And it was the one where I didn't have Kane, and Kane hauled in that game week. And Jimenez, who I did have, he he got like a red card in the Friday night match. And I think that whole game week, I literally had 1 point and like one net point, and it was like Sunday, and I think I didn't even I had like 8 players actually, and had it not been for like this Son Hall, I would have been on like far less points. I ended up going from 1 point to 31 points because literally the only Spurs player I had was Son. I captained him, and that massively softened the red arrow. It was still a bad red arrow, but it would have been far worse if I had a game week score of 1. If Son blanked on that Sunday night fixture, on that Sunday afternoon fixture, I would have been on like a single integer score, and I was absolutely dreading it. So I do worry for those sorts of game weeks as well, that they're still possible for me without any more chips. And yeah, you could just get like a random player getting sent off. And I'm just trying to remember it now. I think it was Saka. I had Saka as well. I had all these players who were high owned, and they just didn't do much. Even the low owned players didn't do much as well. So I've had far too many dark red arrow game weeks this season, and I'm trying to quantify it. Why has that been the case? And the answer is quite simple, actually. It's because the players have become so much more cheaper this season that we're benching a lot of our points, but also in seasons gone by, when a quote unquote casual manager could no longer afford a player, they can now. It's the reality is you're competing against players who aren't worried about missing out on a player by zero point 0.1 million because their price was cut by, let's say, 0.5 million at the start of the season. So it's just making it all the more problematic. And it'll be very interesting to see if FPL kind of keep the prices at a similar like pricing structure for next season as well. Because it kind of, not that it makes the game boring. Like, that was it. A lot of people are like, "Oh, it's going to make it boring." It's actually made it, and initially I thought, "Oh, it's going to make it easy. We can afford pretty much everyone," but it's actually made it a lot harder because you really now get so many of these 50-50s, so many points wasted on the bench, and because so many people own so many informed players, that if you make the wrong 50-50 call, which I've made so many wrong 50-50 calls this season, that if you're on the wrong side of that, you're going from let's say, a stable rank to your rank doubling in the space of one game week. And I've seen that, like I showed you, time and time again this season. So I'm just actually quickly share my game week history again before I go. That I've not actually had many back-to-back green arrows. It's been green. There we go. Green, red, green, red, 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 green, red, green, red, green, red, green, red, green, red. There we go. My last two back-to-back green arrows were in 12 and 13, and even then I went from 375 to 371, 333. There's pretty much a grey arrow, so I don't really count them either. So let's go further back. So this green, red, red, green, red, green, green. Okay, this was like my last true like back-to-back green arrow in game week 5, where I was 549k in game week 3, 379k in game week 4. So that was a green arrow, and then a massive green arrow in game week 5. So that's it. It's just like totally anomalous. And then yeah, game week 1 and 2. Let's call them well, that was just one green arrow there, but I have to go 21 game weeks back, all the way back in what, late August, early September, when I had back-to-back green arrows. And I'll be interesting. I'd ask you to check your own game week histories. Have you had many back-to-back green arrows? Because like for me, it's this is like totally out of my comfort zone. Knowing that I can have one good game week and then one really terrible game week. And it's not because I've captained the wrong person. It's because I made a 50-50 call on a utility player, or I didn't double up on a Newcastle defender, or I didn't get the bandwagon player sooner, which has really been problematic. And I honestly don't know how to handle it for the remainder of the season. But like I've shown there, um, it's just far too many red and green arrows for my own liking this season. It's like a work of art almost. So just laughing. Red, green. It's like, yeah, you just couldn't make it up. So yeah, whilst I advocate a safety first approach, at the same time, I'm gonna really figure out, how can I get more green arrows? I just want to get like 3 green arrows in a row. Is that too much to ask? Who knows? But yeah, look, on that note, it's been fun streaming again live, doing my preview and review as well. In fairness, like I've shown you, I've not really had much to talk about in the past 10 game weeks for my own team until this week. So that's always a plus, coming back online on my stream, returning with a positive story and a deep, dark green arrow, so to speak, as well. But look, apart from that, wishing you all the best for the blank and the double that's coming up, and of course the international break that separates that as well. May your arrows be green, may your mind be serene. Take care and all the best. And yeah, whatever you do, make sure you captain the right person in blank game week 28. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.